That has actually dedicated much of his adult life since my mid-20s until now, it's almost 30 years, to dealing with these issues, to actually asking what should be the relationship between the state of Israel that was established to be the nation state of the Jewish people and diaspora Jews. Israel is extremely unique in this situation. There are other countries around the world that have diasporas. And in some cases, these diasporas include tens of millions of people, maybe more than 100 million, if you look at the case of India. But there's no such equivalent case where for the Jewish people, you have four overarching narratives. One is that we're a nation. All Jews are a nation that is connected to a specific place on the face of this earth, which is the land of Israel. This is really a narrative about exile and return. It's about sovereignty and ownership and control over the land or part of it. So this is the story of nationhood. At the same time, we're a people. I mean, this is the story of peoplehood. We have a shared legacy. We have a shared destiny. This is a story about all Jews being some sort of a family or a tribe, that it has mutual commitment to each other that transcends religious differences, political differences, ideological differences. All of these things are secondary to the fact that we are committed to each other. So there is the story of peoplehood. We're also a religious group that collectively and individually have a relationship with God, and we're also a group that has a mission to humanity, to better the world, to serve the family of nations. Now, what is so interesting is that we're a religious group, but only 20 or 30%, maybe 50% of Jews throughout history were really religious and observant. It may have gone up to 40% at some point, but in no point in history, all Jews were religious. So, and that's how, while many other groups around the world think about us as a religion. You ask most Americans, what is the relevant other to a Jew? They will say a Christian and a Muslim, meaning they view us as a religion. Whereas, for example, the United Nations, when they decided on the establishment of the State of Israel, the partition decision, spoke about a Jewish state and an Arab state. So for the United Nations in 1947, Jews were like Arabs, not like Christians and Muslims, right? So you're seeing all these distinctions being played out all the time between regarding this identity, the collective identity of the Jewish people. And my argument in my book, Flexigidity, is actually we are all four at the same time.
Right.
So some people view us as a religion, and some Jews will define themselves through their religion. Others view us as a people, and there are Jews who view themselves primarily as part of the Jewish people. Same thing about a nation. Some around the world, they view us through the prism of nationhood, and there are Jews, especially in Israel, who view themselves exclusively through this prism of nationality. And there are others who believe that we are here to serve humanity. And this comes to the narrative of Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place. This is sort of a more modern day manifestation of this idea, but it has been forever part of our mission. Forever, I mean, since the days of Abraham.
I was also curious about one part of your personal journey. I think you considered yourself, or maybe still do consider yourself, a secular Jew. But and tell me if I'm wrong about that, but you also talked about at a certain point you decided to start observing the Jewish holidays, in particular the fast days. Could you tell me about that decision making and the reasoning behind that?
Corey, where did you dig that one up? That's interesting. Nobody ever asked me. I've been on many podcasts. Nobody asked about that point.
That's my job, man.
Yes. So basically, when you look at the Jewish calendar, there's 5 fasts that are national fasts. They commemorate key events in our history. The day of the breach of the walls of Jerusalem, on the 17th day of the month of Tammuz. Tisha B'Av, when Jerusalem was destroyed twice, and many other calamities happened to the Jewish people. Gimel Tishrei, this is the 3rd day of the month of Tishrei, right after Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the Jewish year, which is effectively next week. And when we fast for the for the killing, the assassination of a leader by the name of Dalia that was basically led to the exile of the Jews from their land. And then we have Yud B'Tevet, the 10th of Tevet, which is when we believe that Moses died, and his grave is unknown. So we commemorate all those that died who don't have a grave, including millions of people in the Holocaust, and so on. So these are national events. And I realized that as a person who really believed in the nationhood of the Jewish people, I cannot let these dates go unnoticed. And there are many ways to pay respect to a day that actually commemorates a central event in the history of our people. And I could be very creative about how to do that. But really, our tradition offers us one basic manifestation, which is to fast, to acknowledge that this day is different. It's different in the sense that it commemorates a very sad moment in our history. And part of this sadness is expression of this sadness is to actually deprive oneself of the pleasure of food and water for a day. So I wasn't creative enough to think about all these sophisticated ways of eternalizing in my life and of these moments. So I just said, I'll fast. There is one fasting day which is different, which is Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is a deeply religious day. And because I am a secular Jew, I don't live a life of faith, but I am a very national Jew. I believe in the Jewish peoplehood. Actually, Yom Kippur was the last fast that I took upon myself. For years, I would fast the 5 national fasts, but it wasn't important for me to fast in Yom Kippur. It's only later in life that I actually also began to do that. Initially, again, just as a kind of an expression of peoplehood. I said, if all of my people is fasting, or most of my people are fasting on Yom Kippur, I should do that too. It's not that difficult. And it was just a kind of a not eating experience. Yeah. Later in life, I began to appreciate the tremendous human value of Yom Kippur and the message that it carries to the individual. And then the fasting on Yom Kippur became very meaningful to me. But again, not as a religious person, but as a person that actually appreciates the cycle of the Jewish year, that in which in every holiday, there is a deeply meaningful message to the individual. In the case of Yom Kippur, the message is, and I learned this from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who says that in Yom Kippur, we have the opportunity to take control of our fate. The Greek philosophy believed that a person is basically fate. Fate is destiny. You cannot escape your fate. This is why we have the Greek tragedies. All these Greeks who are trying to escape their fate, they're maneuvering, they're changing their lives, they're fighting their fate, but eventually their fate meets them, meaning character is fate. Judaism carries a different message, and that is that with enough work and intentionality, we can change our character, we can change our fate. And that is a huge message of Yom Kippur, and I so believe in it today, is that today, when I go to synagogue, not today, it's been years now, when I go to synagogue on Yom Kippur, the whole question of whether I believe in God or not believe in God, that becomes really secondary to the profound meaning of the day and the message to me as an individual. That is, if I focus, if I have the intention, I can change fundamental things in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about observing the fast days, especially as one who feels a profound connection to is our nationhood and our peoplehood, I want to think about this more. But you're inspiring in me some thoughts about why I still really, really appreciate one of my favorite holidays of the year is Pesach. And because to this day, we still observe Seder. And I remember as a little boy going to my grandfather's house in Brooklyn and reading from the very same Haggadahs that we read from today. My father leads, and it's a very joyful, even when we were at odds, my father and I had years where we had a very tense relationship. but we still connected on Pesach. And what it meant to me was the way the invitation to my bar mitzvah went, as my father and grandfather before me. And it's not just about the men, it's about the men and the women and our whole family, our whole mishpacha, that we were, by retelling the story in this sort of ritualistic way, but a ritualistic way that included our children. And now that I have my children at the table, and my children are maybe within a few years of having their children, and me remembering my by retelling the story of our people, we're also participating in the story of our people. Does that make sense?
This is so profound what you just said. So just last week in the Parsha of the week, we read that Moses is really at the final chapter of his life. At the age of 80, he accepted the role of leader. Age of 80, he accepts to become the leader of the Jewish people to confront Pharaoh. He is actually an Egyptian prince who was pushed to the desert, and now he comes back to face Pharaoh, if we can imagine that, in the name of the Jewish people. And then he leads the Jewish people through 40 years of in the desert. He's now at the end of his life, and he's conveying to the Jewish people in the book of the Devarim, Deuteronomy. He's basically conveying to the Jewish people an eternal message about the covenant that has been created between the people and God. And he says there very clearly, he says, this covenant is not just between me and you, those who are present here. It's also with those who are not present here, meaning the future generations. That covenant that has been created between the Jewish people and God is an eternal covenant. And again, obviously, there are a lot of people who see this through religious prism. To me, this covenant is actually a commandment to always strive to be better individuals, but also a better community, a better society, and to serve humanity. That to me is the message that we carry forward. We always have to strive to be better, or communally, societally, obviously individually, but then in the service of humanity. So Pesach, if we look at Pesach, right, we spoke about the four narratives: nationhood, peoplehood, being enlightened to the nations, and a religious community. All of these narratives are present in the Seder. When we sit down for the Seder, they're all there.
They're all there.
Pesach is the moment where we came together as a people. We turned from 12 tribes into a people. This is the moment where we celebrate our shared legacy and our shared destiny. This is also a story of nationhood. We left Egypt to return to the land of Israel. It's a story of repatriation of an entire group of people that was willing to cross the sea and cross the desert and wandered in the desert for 40 years before coming back to the land of Israel. This is the story of Pesach, the story of Exodus. It's also a story of being enlightened to the nation. I mean, again, mentioning him the second time, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, he describes this clash between Moses and Pharaoh as a clash between monotheism and idolatry. The Egyptians believe in the notion that there is a person that is a demigod, meaning he's half person, half God. His name is Pharaoh, and you have all these magicians around him that they have all these superpowers. And Moses is standing there representing a group of slaves, and he's saying to Pharaoh, no, you're not. You are just like anybody else. This is the beginning of basic human rights, basic political rights. It all emanates from there. And then, of course, it's a very religious moment. We celebrate in Pesach the Exodus and eventually the covenant that was created between the people of Israel and God in Mount Sinai. So what I'm saying is all these four narratives are present around the table. These narratives are not some philosophical ideas in the back door of our bookshelves. On our bookshelves. They are concrete. You can read about them today in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel. All four of them are there in 1,100 words in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel. And they contain, those 1,100 words, these four narratives, very present right now. This is the building block, not just of our past, it's also of our future.
So ironically, when you talk about that story, the idea of the 12 tribes of the descendants of Israel becoming one nation and God's formation of a people, a one people, it occurred to me from reading Insights, your book from last year, from 2023, as you recap your involvement with negotiations that negotiations that have been going on for decades in different moments and forms, a huge part of the difficulty in negotiating peace is managing all of the different factions of your own side. Not just you, but your interlocutors on the Palestinian side, and especially the extremists. Do you am I on the right track there? Like, I don't know why that didn't occur to me, but like managing the chaos of your own, the different
Yes, of course.
states and factions.
So, Corey, just to share with your audience, we're talking about the negotiations between 1999 and 2001
Right, right.
toward trying to reach a peace agreement. We used to call it the Framework Agreement on Permanent Status. This is like a kind of the political and diplomatic name for
Yeah,
what you may call the peace treaty. And this agreement came after 6 years of a process called the Oslo process. So the Oslo process began in September 1993. It was supposed to lead to the resolution of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. So come the permanent status negotiations, I was the secretary of the Israeli delegation. I was the youngest and was junior member of the team, but nonetheless part of it. At the center of everything was happening, which I describe my
in
experiences
the
in the
room
book,
where it happened,
in the room where the sausage is made,
or where
and
you
that
had to give Barack, the prime minister,
Heimlich maneuver.
Heimlich maneuver.
Listen, if there's one practical thing that all your listeners should take from this conversation is everybody needs to know how to Heimlich. In a split second, you can save someone's life. It happened to
Absolutely.
me 3 times, 2 times more since Camp David,
But
that
only one
I
prime minister.
only one prime minister, but every life is the same. He's the prime
Yeah.
minister, but in terms of life, it's the same. A friend of ours in a restaurant, she eats salad and a piece of lettuce covers her, her throat,
Yeah.
and I had to Heimlich her in the restaurant.
Wow. My brother did
So
that for my Uncle Jerry. So I've seen it. I've seen it. And I learned it. I've never had to perform it myself, but I have learned it.
everybody should have,
Yeah.
please, listeners, do it. You may save your friend's life, your
Yeah.
family's life.
Yeah.
Anyhow, going back to
Yeah.
managing complex negotiations. So the Camp David is really defined as complex negotiations. There are many issues at stake. All these issues are intertwined. There are trade-offs that you need to make within each issue. For example, let's say on territory, there are trade-offs that you can make within the issue of territory, but there's also trade-off among the different issues. Okay, so it's really complex. There are many, many building blocks in the air that you need to bring together. Those of you that will take the time to read the book, you'll see that we, meaning the Israeli side, we had in our draft agreement, there were close to 180 provisions. Many of these provisions had more than one point in them. So we're talking about hundreds of elements
Yeah.
that need to be synchronized in one agreement. So naturally, when you do that on our side, there are a lot of factions. People have different opinions. There are those who, even among those who support the agreement, there are a lot of priorities. People are prioritizing different issues. So when you're the chief negotiator, my boss, or me as the secretary of the delegation, you're actually orchestrating all these factions around you. And I'm not even talking about all those who even oppose the idea of an agreement with the Palestinians for a variety of reasons. And then the same process happens on the other side. Meaning on the other side are those who really support, in principle, reaching an agreement with Israel, and they're willing to do what they call a historical compromise to get there. And there are those that oppose the agreement. And in their case, there was also their leader, Yasser Arafat, that was really undetermined. Many people say objected to the idea of reaching a peace treaty with Israel. So, yes, it's a story. My book is about negotiating with the Palestinians and attempting to reach a peace treaty. But the book is also, if you generalize the experiences in the book, if you take them out of these specific Israeli-Palestinian experiences, it's really a book about complex political negotiations.
Yeah.
And it's probably relevant to many other cases in history.
Well, in reading some of your recent articles, I noticed that there's flexigidity. There's some things that probably go all the way back to 1996, which I wanted to ask you about. One of the things you refer to is I think it was in spring of 1996, you recommended undertaking as you called it, a comprehensive research strategy and policy planning exercise ahead of negotiations with the Palestinians on permanent status that would ultimately wouldn't begin for another 3 or 4 years. So first, you're a 25 or 26-year-old kid at that point.
26.
How were you able to get the ear of the people who would ultimately greenlight a project like that? But then how were you able to to craft such an important, comprehensive report?
So basically, the last section of my book is called A Note to Aspiring History Makers. And it's basically like a letter to the young me,
Yeah.
which was then 25, and you want to be part of a historical process. And how would you go about it? And I have to say, the right intuition. And my intuition was, if I want to be involved in something that is historically important for the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and I say again, also for the Jewish people outside of Israel, I have to get in the room. And I was willing to cut my salary in half. I was willing to let go of being in the cadet course of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is a very prestigious path for diplomats in Israel, to actually carry the bags, literally carry the bags of the team of people that created the Oslo Accords. And that's how I started.